So each quarter you bring out a multiple report, but each year you do a full report of how the multiples have performed, which I think is key for decision making for our retailers. The CMJ being founded on the fact that it was defending independent jewellers from the big multiples and the power they had, and by forming the group in the 80s, I guess they defended themselves against that because they pooled their own resources and demanded the same terms.
Yeah.
We're in a different climate now, but I think their power is still very much relevant. But what we can do now is harness their information, their data, and really use it to our advantage. So that's the lovely work that you do. Do you want to talk a bit more about what that looks like?
Yeah, so like you say, we capture data on the multiples, which is not necessarily data that is not readily available in the public domain, but we go above and beyond for our members to capture that on a weekly basis and compile it into a quarterly report and, like you've mentioned, into the annual report. We've been doing so for a number of years now, but the data as we have it in the current format, we've been capturing for 3 years. So on a quarterly basis, we include a multitude of different things, but it also includes the core product pricing comparison. So we look at a range of different products, and we enable our members to see how that fares in relation to their own product to make sure that they're price comparative. But for the annual review, it's a great snapshot to see what the multiples have implemented over the last year, to see what products they've got from a sale perspective, how their quantity of products have changed, because the multiples are typically creatures of habit.
Yep.
The points in which their sales happen tend to be the same time throughout the calendar year.
And of course you track that year on year anyway.
Exactly. But what tends to happen is the quantity of sale peaks and troughs. So what we've included in this report is a year-on-year comparison, so our members can see that as a comparison.
Yeah.
Because we do have some quite big disparities in the year-on-year sale quantity. So I wanted to just kind of give that information to our members so they could see how it's changing out there from a multiples perspective.
Definitely. And I guess if you're a retailer that's in the town of a multiple, and maybe we'll talk a bit about what those multiples are, but it's key to understand when their sale periods are going to be, so you can, alter your business to combat that or to align with it, because you want to be competitive against those retailers. And of course, we really champion independent business and the difference in level of service we'd like to think that our independents can offer, because they're more personal and it's their own business at the end of the day. But what this data gives them is an opportunity to really focus their efforts and marketing strategies based around what these multiples are doing.
Absolutely. We always say that knowledge is power. And if you don't understand what your competitor, whether that be a huge multiple or an independent down the road, knowledge is power. You need to understand what your competitor is doing. So that's why we provide this data to our members, so that they know on, either a monthly basis, quarterly basis, or on an annual review basis, what those multiples are doing or are likely to be doing in the months ahead.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's key for any business now, because this isn't just on the high street, this is online as well. So you're getting it from all angles on where you need to remain competitive and understand what those big powerhouses are doing.
So we look at Ernest Jones, Beaverbrooks, Fraser Hart, F. Hines, Goldsmiths, Warren James, and H. Samuel.
So a huge amount of data that you're having to capture there.
Yeah.
And obviously this is general publicly available, so you can pick up this data if you want to, but I think the point here is you specifically gather this data from multiple resources and put it all into one place for our retailers to digest and take the pieces that are relevant to them.
Correct, yeah.
So it's a huge undertaking and a massive advantage, I would say. So a big part of that, I guess, is looking at what's been the focus for those big multiples. So we know as our own retailers that non-essential purchases aren't up the list of most important in this day and age. So what we've seen, and that's reading through your data, is that incentives or incentivizing these the general public to purchase from a multiple is up. and they're really focused on that.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
For sure. All 7 have implemented some kind of incentivized purchase,
Yeah.
whether that be a gift with purchase, or whether it's an e-gift card over a certain amount of spend. That could be on a certain amount of spend, or it could be on luxury watches that the consumer will get an e-gift card in return. So it typically starts at around 175 and it could go up to £500. Or it could be as straightforward as you get a free item when you purchase an item.
Yeah.
Some have run that throughout the year.
Yeah.
And it tends to ramp up around the golden quarter, as we would expect.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's something that they're really ramping up, as you say, because of non-essential spending. The multiples are really driving incentivized purchases to get the consumers into their stores.
And I guess that gets our retailers thinking about how they incentivize their own customers. And there's a blueprint out there on how you do this. Yes, there is going to be an element where if they're a big multiple, they can demand more from their suppliers. But I think we're in a position now where you can look at your own stock and think, I guess, intelligently about how you could maybe use some sale items as part of these incentives, or a gift with purchase, or however you want to do it. And particularly offering services in store as a gift with purchase.
Absolutely.
So whether that's a battery change or a jewellery clean, whatever it is, I think it can really be utilised by our own members.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the independent sector is ideally placed to be able to utilise gift with purchase to increase footfall into their own store.
Definitely. What have been the big trends for the multiples then? What are we looking at from a product point of view?
So from a product point of view, we look at the kind of watches that retailers have in sale. We look at the kind of metal mixes that they have in sale, and we have noticed that both silver and platinum have increased in sale share perspective.
Yeah.
So we've noticed that throughout the year.
I guess that's one thing we noticed again from the Christmas survey is that white metal trend doesn't seem to be going anywhere, and of course I think we all agree it's driven heavily by the price of gold as well. So it's interesting that the multiples have really picked up on that as well.
Yeah, for sure. Also noticing some interest in lab-grown diamonds as well. So a few of the multiples are launching lab-grown diamond collections.
Feels slow to the race, really.
I know, right? It feels slow, but I don't know whether they were just seeing how the market was doing, or whether they were just building their collection. But they are coming out with collections, but it's sitting alongside their current diamond collections quite nicely. Some have quite large collections, others only have a small collections. And then others have been quite vocal in saying that they have no interest whatsoever in getting in the lab-grown diamond arena, shall we say. So it's kind of a mixed bag from a lab-grown to natural.
Interesting.
Market.
I think that's one definitely to monitor over the next year.
We've also seen some increases in Black Friday. So I spoke about this at the seminar in regards to Black Friday. There were 2 retailers who hadn't got involved in Black Friday. So Fraser Hart or Warren James, we hadn't necessarily seen them get involved in Black Friday before. Fraser Hart appeared to have got involved in Black Friday, but they had actually pulled their sale volume back online quite substantially in the weeks leading up to it. So although it looked that they were involved, they weren't necessarily.
I guess that's again something for our retailers to think about, because it is a perception that Black Friday is when you can gain all those sales. But if you've got a sale period end of summer or something like that where you can hold back some stock and really focus on that being a footfall driver or an online driver, then you've got an opportunity to shift the same amount of stock. You're just going to hold on to it for a little bit longer.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I guess from another trend point of view is understanding from a retailer point of view, where brands, particularly in watches, because it's an easy one to track with multiples, have really taken some success over the last year.
Yeah, so we track kind of social exposure online and who the multiples are pushing from a brand perspective. And looking at watches, Tudor has been screamed about on social media for a lot of the multiple retailers for the last 2 years.
A fair bit of money behind them.
Yeah, I can imagine. Particularly the Black Bay has received a lot of social exposure. So we've also looked at kind of the flip side, and there's more detail within the report as to other brands that have had good social exposure. But we've looked at the flip side of that and the kind of opportunity brands for our members that might be able to benefit from, as opposed to kind of just what the multiples are pushing. Yeah. So those kind of opportunity brands are potentially Citizen, Seconda, Bulliver, Raymond Vale, or Rotary. They are promoted on social media, but not necessarily as much. Yeah. So there's some great opportunity brands that our members would be able to promote on social media.
You feel like that's almost more organic growth, or because those multiples have got behind those brands, it's really helped with the perception in the general public.
Yeah.
And again, for those that are suppliers of ours, Citizen in particular, we've seen a really good increase in terms of buy-in volume. So we've been tracking that ourselves, and it's interesting to see that mirrors what's happening in the multiple world.
Yeah, and from while we're sticking on a watch point of view, we look at Goldsmiths and their CPO, their certified pre-owned collection, Rolex especially, that has grown 50%, and it's now the second largest brand, second to the Rolex brand itself.
Wow!
So the growth in their certified pre-owned is huge, and they're really kind of pushing that pre-owned element of the business.
And we see, I guess, a lot of our retailers are now focused on pre-owned, not just watches, but jewellery as well. And I guess one of the questions moving forward is what's really driving that? Because I guess from my point of view, I wouldn't necessarily think of a pre-owned product or a pre-owned product of jewellery as necessarily a gifting option. But maybe there's a different mindset with the Gen Z. Maybe there's a whole environmental factor to it. But I guess when you're talking about Rolexes, there's the investment opportunity and it's a status thing. But these have got to be self-purchases, right?
I think self-purchases, I think gifting as well. I think it all comes around to, like you mentioned, the Gen Z and the difference in demographics, the circular economy. I think it's multifaceted. I think there's lots of different reasons as to why people would go down that second-hand route. Different routes such as eBay and things like that. It's opened up people's eyes as to what's available and where it's available.
And I guess it's that bit that's unique, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, activity for Q4. Yeah. So you're talking about the financial year. Some key dates coming up.
Yeah, there are.
What are the multiples looking at doing in those periods?
Yeah, so we also include calendar days within our multiples.
Only available to CMJ members.
And 70 to 80% of the calendar days that we put out, the dates within our calendar actually come to fruition. So it's really important that our members take a look at that data. But calendar days within that, we have Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, National Proposal Day. We obviously had LVMH Watch Week. We've got Watches and Wonders. We've also got Easter. So there's lots of things.
It's a busy period after
going
Christmas.
on, within the next kind of couple of months. So we expect the multiples to be pushing quite heavily on all of those campaigns, on all of their platforms. So everything from diamond set pieces, obviously, especially important when it's coming up to Valentine's and National Proposal. From a Mother's Day perspective, it will be heart kind of chains and pendants and earrings, anything that kind of
personalization
emotes the emotion.
I think that as well brings up a good point on personalization. It's not necessarily a huge factor for the multiples, because when we're talking about what they can physically do in store, they're not going to have the facilities to do a lot of these things. When we're talking about welded bracelets, getting things engraved, those sort of things, it really isn't something that they can necessarily utilize, especially there and then. So these opportunities that drive footfall into the store, I mean, you have to be there as a person physically for some of these to get done, I think really is going to be a big advantage for independents.
Yeah, I mean, H. Samuel have got permanent bracelets, and they do welded, but it is only in select stores.
Exactly.
But you're right, from an independent sector, they're well positioned to manage that from a consumer point of view.
Service and experience.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So Mother's Day and Valentine's, I would imagine, the biggest of those dates?
Yeah, for sure, from a sale perspective, yeah.
Because Valentine's Day, I guess, my background coming from a supplier point of view, seemed to drop year on year. It didn't seem to be a bit of focus, and I don't know whether that could have been a hangover from the COVID era, and that people were spending more on experience than they were physical presence. But what's it looking like for this year? What's your predictions?
Yeah, I think Valentine's will always be high up there. I think from a proposal perspective, Christmas is probably overtaken Valentine's, and we also see it in some of the data that we have for 2024, that one of the multiples really spiked in 2023 around Valentine's. We didn't see that spike in 2024, but you need to be a member to get the data to see
Absolutely.
in detail. So yeah, I think it's still going to be important as always, but it sits behind December, if you ask me.
Okay, so for this final quarter, any key points that our retailers need to be aware of from a multiple perspective?
Yeah, from a multiple perspective, I think we've touched on incentivized purchases and gift with purchases. I think we really need to be tapping into that a lot more, because we're in an independent sector is best placed to tap into that element. Those kind of opportunity watch brands that we spoke about, that the multiples aren't necessarily shouting about on social media. Retailers who are watch stockists can get behind those brands and be potentially driving those sales both in store and online, and to utilize the calendar days that are in that report. Like I said, 70 to 80% of our predictions actually come to fruition. So it might be that the offer that the multiple implements is slightly different on the calendar day, and that might be by 5%. But our prediction around the date that offer is put in place tends to fall in when we say it's going to fall in. So yeah, those are the kind of three things for me for people to be aware of.
Like we say, that calendar is only available to CMJ members, and I think it's very important that they really do utilise that and build their marketing plan around it if they haven't already. And of course, we finish the next quarter with our trade show. So it'll be really interesting to see how this has played out over the next couple of months.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Jen.